Hey there, let's talk about overheating. That's right, overheating. We seem to be talking about this after what seems to be every single camera release. And this video is not just about the recent Lumix releases, although I will talk about those later on in the video. And this video will be a little bit of a rant, but I also have some advice for both users and manufacturers. So I've been talking about overheating on this channel basically since I started it almost 4 years ago, and some people say I'm even obsessed with overheating, but I want to explain why. I test and review cameras and then share my findings with the internet. And I do believe that people should know the capabilities of the camera that they either own or maybe they're considering purchasing. And when I make these videos, I can help share those results so people can educate themselves about a camera that they own or maybe want to buy. So also for me personally, most of you know I live in North Carolina, which is in the southern part of the United States, and I mainly shoot video. I don't really do much photography. And I need a camera that doesn't overheat. So for example, this past wedding, so this would be late June here in North Carolina, I went and shot a wedding, and it was 95 degrees Fahrenheit and full humidity. It was really hot. It was normal southern heat here, which is many months out of the year. And we were using Canon cinema cameras to shoot the wedding because we knew we needed them to run. We needed them to be reliable. We used a C80 and two C70s. We had zero issues whatsoever, and we had the right camera for the job. And it was funny because after the ceremony, one of the guests came out to me, and everyone was seriously overheated. We had everyone was holding fans and drinking a lot of water, and it was really hot outside. And one of the guests came up to me and said, "Are your cameras okay out in the heat?" And I was like, yeah, we have, cinema cameras with fans in them. It's not a big deal at all. And that in addition to hearing about all the overheating lately with the Lumix cameras, made me want to make this video. So this may not apply to everyone. It really depends on where you live and what you do. But it's something you should be aware of about the camera you either own or are thinking about buying. Now, like I said, I like to cover overheating and runtimes in my reviews, but I've actually never gotten a camera prior to launch to review. And so whenever I am able to test out and review a camera, it's after it's already shipped. So I can't help educate potential buyers for that camera. Now, I would love to get a camera early and be able to release a review at embargo time because I think it would be helpful for people that are purchasing that camera, but that opportunity hasn't been presented to me yet, so I don't have the opportunity to do that. And I've even made dedicated overheating and runtime test videos when I get a camera to review that I think necessitates a dedicated video for it. So if you look on my channel, you'll see a bunch of those. Now, unfortunately, a lot of customers and users are buying these cameras at launch based on the reviews they see and looking at the specs. Now, I'm not saying everyone is biased and a shill on YouTube, which is what the narrative has been lately. So either the reviewers that people are watching either aren't testing and reporting these issues, or maybe the viewers aren't finding the people that are testing and reporting those. I don't know what's going on. I can only speak for myself here. But like I said, I'm not in the group of people to review cameras early as of now, so I can only do what I can do, which is review the cameras after they launch. And so if you are someone who's not in a rush to get the new model, I would usually wait until the camera gets out into people's hands and ships, and then people can report their findings as well. And then I always get people that come to me and say, well, Josh, you said this camera overheats. Mine's never overheated. And it may not for your situation until it does. And a great example of this was the Sony a7 IV. I got it launched. I made a lot of content on it. Love the a7 IV, still a great camera. And I had some overheating issues. Yes, I had the temperature warning set to high, screen out, all the things you're supposed to do. It overheated on me once when I was filming in my backyard for my farming channel, and then twice in my studio where I was using it for podcasting, where I was using HDMI out and recording in the camera. And that camera became unreliable for me for internal recording. I know some people will then say, well, just use an external recorder, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into workarounds and stuff later. But it may not happen to you until it does. So just keep that in mind. Everyone's use case is different. Now, I want to talk about one of the issues with all of this, and that is going to be bad marketing. Now, these camera companies usually hype up the video specs of these hybrid cameras, and people get all excited about them because we all like a lot of specs. And I think the best example of this, if you can remember, if you were in this camera world then, was the Canon R5 when it came out in 2020. It got launched as this 8K video camera and all this other stuff. People got so hyped about it. shot 10-bit video. It was a huge new release from Canon. And then it came out that it overheated and it turned into this whole debacle. I think that if they had marketed as a photo camera that did a little bit of 8K video and let people know that it was very limited in terms of runtime and overheating, and there's also a lot more issues that came out of that whole thing with the R5. But anyways, I think it was a bad marketing there that it was marketed as this like high-end video featured camera when it's really a photo camera that does some video that has some limitations. And there's plenty of examples with other brands over the past few years. This isn't just Canon, but I think that's the one example that really stands out. So I want to give some advice for all of you guys, the users and owners of cameras. If you need a video camera, then buy a camera that is designed for video. So what do I mean by that? I mean a camera that physically is set up to run and run and run and never overheat. So, these cameras over here that I have on the desk, these cameras are the ones I have, and this is like the C80, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K full frame, and the FX3. These are examples. Cameras like from Canon, like the R5C, the C70, C80, C400. From Sony, like the FX30, the FX3, the FX6, Blackmagic cameras, Red cameras, etc. Those are cameras that are designed to be reliable video cameras. They will not overheat. If you buy a hybrid style camera, and so I know you'll say like, the FX3 is a hybrid. Yes, it takes photos, but you guys know what I mean. Not a camera that is designed for video. Then you need to know that it will have limitations in terms of run times and overheating. For example, I own a Canon R5 II. I love that camera, but I know I can't use it as a dedicated video camera. I've even tested it out with the fan grip. I made a whole video about that. And for professional shoot, I personally would reach for a different camera before the R5 II unless it was specifically for hybrid work, like I was actually taking photos, which the R5 II is actually really good at, obviously, or just very short clips in cooler environments. And I would have to be really careful if I was using it out in the heat. Now, I took my R5 II out on a real estate gig. I was shooting 4K 60 in short clips, and the camera actually overheated several times on me in that time frame. And I was, like I said, I was short clips, 4K 60, screen out, temperature setting to high, all that stuff, and it happened multiple times on a shoot. So that was not a camera that I would want to use in that situation. But I use the R5 II for wildlife and travel and photography and those sorts of things. So I know there's a lot of professional videographers out there making a living or wanting to make a living with mirrorless cameras. They have great specs, they're small, they're easy to use, they have great autofocus and stabilization, and the image quality is excellent, etc. And they're affordable. But if you make a living with your camera, please make sure you have the right tool for the job. Having your camera overheat in front of a client is very embarrassing and unprofessional, and you might even miss a moment or a shot like filming an event, like a wedding, like I was just talking about. So make sure you have the right tool for the right job and understand the limitations of your camera. Now, some advice for the manufacturers. The easy answer is, well, make cameras that don't overheat, but they're being forced to cram more and more specs and features into cameras that people want in a small body. And we're coming up with a lot of limitations here, and I think that's definitely something that happened with some of these Lumix cameras, which we'll talk about in a second. I just also wish that the camera manufacturers were more transparent about overheating and run times. Like I mentioned before, there are some manufacturers that will list times for certain frame rates, codecs, and temperatures and those sorts of things. But I think if it says like, 6K 60 or 8K 120 or whatever it is, like let us know that it has limitations and what those are and what people can expect. Now, like I said, some companies are really good about this, and it says in their manuals, like Canon actually does this, but I think the manufacturers need to be more transparent about this. And also, obviously the easy answer would be to make cameras that don't overheat. Anyways, let's talk about the Lumix stuff and how that relates in all of this, because Lumix came out with a few new cameras. They look awesome. I haven't actually gotten to use these cameras yet, so we're talking about the S1R Mark II, the S1 II, and the S1 IIe. So because I haven't actually used these cameras, I can't speak about their overheating and those sorts of things. So I'm just seeing what people post, and they're discovering that, after they get the camera in, they watch the reviews, the specs, they pre-order the camera, they got it in just in the last few weeks. I'm talking about like the S1 II in particular, and they start using it and they overheat and they get really upset. And I would be too, I'd be upset. So is this a problem with the manufacturers, the camera reviewers and influencers, or is it a problem with the user or the person buying the camera? I think all of the above, actually, but I kind of already talked about this. So what's crazy to me is that these cameras actually have active cooling, right? They have a fan in them, and they really pushed the video specs at launch. So we have a camera that is, overpowered for the cooling, and we have a lot of hyped up specs at launch. And that's going to lead to people buying the camera and then getting disappointed. So after I see these people post about overheating with the S1 II in particular, it makes me laugh at all of the Sony FX3 content that came out, because you know what the most important feature for me for any camera is? It's when it runs and doesn't shut down. I know it's a really basic thing, but in a professional situation, you need your camera to actually run. So when it runs and doesn't shut down, that's a big win for me as far as I'm concerned. So, if you have a camera like the S1 II that has really great specs and the camera looks amazing, and I can't wait to try one at some point, and people rip on the FX3, for example, because it's older, it doesn't have open gate, it doesn't have the anamorphic support, it doesn't have the best whatever features that doesn't have because it's older. I know that when I take this camera out, or the C80 or an FX30 or a Blackmagic camera, I know the cameras are just going to work and they're not going to shut down. And this is obviously very important for professional work, for paid gigs. But as someone who mainly does YouTube, it's also really important for when I'm doing YouTube, because I've had plenty of cameras that people say they don't overheat, but when I put them in my studio and I use them for long form recording, like if I'm doing a podcast or a long tutorial or something like that, they overheat. A great example of that was the Sony ZV-E1. I thought that camera would be awesome. It's like half the price of an FX3, same image quality. I used it for an overhead camera in my studio here, which is only like 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and it overheated before I was done with the tutorial. I need my cameras to be reliable. So we all want all of these specs in a tiny body, and unfortunately, at the time of recording this isn't possible in these small mirrorless hybrid style small body cameras. We need the manufacturers to put these kinds of specs in cameras, because we all want these specs, but these cameras need to have better and proper cooling. So in addition to overheating and shutting the camera down, the other part of it is the performance of the sensor. Now, when a sensor heats up and gets really warm, it will also get noisier. So in general, we need a new design for some of these small-bodied cameras to facilitate proper cooling. We also might need to rethink just the physical design of these cameras. And if you're looking for a camera that is being advertised and marketed as a video camera with really good video specs, we need to get away from this form factor a little bit. Now, some of the camera companies have done this. And so, for example, the FX3, they bumped out the body, they put the big fan unit on the back. Same thing with the R5C. They made the camera bigger to facilitate cooling. And that's when you see a lot of these cameras that can do high-end video work and not overheat, they're bigger bodies. We need to start doing that. So when I see a camera, these new Lumix cameras that have these similar small designs, but they have very small fans and inefficient cooling, or not enough cooling, I should say, that's a problem as a videographer. So the last thing I want to talk about is fans and workarounds. So I know a lot of people say, they message me all the time, say, Josh, just get a fan for that. Ulanzi makes them, or some other company. So here's my thoughts about that. I wouldn't buy a camera personally or advise a person to buy a camera knowing that it overheats to then plan on adding a third party or even first party accessory. I would like to get a camera that is designed to work as I need it to work. Now, I know that's easier said than done. I know everyone has different budgets. I also know that some people have already bought these cameras and didn't see the information about overheating prior to purchase, or maybe they bought it to use for certain things and then their use case changes. So, these are options. And I see a lot of people saying, well, just get a fan, just record externally, use an SSD, use this card, put an umbrella over your camera, all these things. I think the bottom line is we need some of these cameras to start changing in the way they're built and the way they're marketed, but we also need to understand and become more knowledgeable about all this stuff as users and consumers so we buy the right camera for us. Anyways, sorry, a little bit of a rant, but yeah, hopefully this all gets better and you guys are more aware of all these things. I can't wait to test those Lumix cameras when I get my hands on them. As of now, I don't know how much they overheat, but we'll see. Anyways, rambling. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.